History is rarely a clean line between good and evil. It is often written in the gray slush of a battlefield. In January 1945, the Ardennes forest was a cathedral of ice. The temperature had plummeted to 15 degrees, turning engine lubricants into a thick, useless paste, and making the steel of an M4 Sherman tank painful to the touch. This was the twilight of the Battle of the Bulge. The Third Army, under General George S. Patton, Jr., was not just fighting a German counteroffensive. They were uncovering a nightmare. Near the Belgian village of Chenogne, men of the 11th Armored Division captured a group of SS soldiers from the 1st SS Panzer Division, the infamous Leibstandarte. Among them was an Obersturmführer with a face as cold as the landscape. During a tense makeshift interrogation in a frozen tent, this officer didn't look like a man who had lost. He looked like a man who had enjoyed the war too much. When questioned about the Malmedy massacre, where over 80 American POWs were gunned down in cold blood just weeks prior, the officer didn't flinch. Instead, he bragged. Through a weary translator, he claimed his unit never took prisoners because mercy is a weakness of the decadent West. He boasted that he had personally delivered the final shots into the heads of wounded boys from the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion. He spoke of it with a pride that chilled the Americans more than the winter wind. This wasn't just a soldier boasting. It was a collision of two irreconcilable worlds. The SS officer saw himself as a Nietzschean Superman. The American GIs saw a rabid animal that had forgotten its place. Patton was briefed on this encounter at his forward command post. He didn't erupt in a fit of rage as many expected. He became eerily, deathly quiet. He looked at the reports of his own men found frozen in the snow with their hands tied behind their backs. To Patton, the logic was simple. If the enemy refuses the rules of civilization, they forfeit its protection. He famously remarked to his staff, "The difficulty in understanding the German is that you don't realize he is a barbarian who belongs to the epoch of the Goths." In that silence, a decision was made. This wasn't just a response to a single brag. It was the moment Patton decided to strip the SS of their status as soldiers. This wasn't just a military decision. It was an act of cold, surgical erasure. The consequence was immediate. Patton didn't need to sign an execution warrant. He simply provided the moral oxygen for what was coming. He knew that the 11th Armored was raw, bleeding, and looking for justice. By refusing to punish the excesses of his men against the SS, Patton sent a message that echoed louder than any artillery barrage. The myth of the invincible SS was about to meet the reality of American retribution. To understand the Third Army in 1945, you must understand the man who shaped its soul. Patton was not a modern general of spreadsheets and logistics. He was a warrior poet who believed in reincarnation and the ancient laws of blood. When he received reports that SS units were openly mocking the Geneva Convention, he didn't call for a legal inquiry. He called for a reckoning. On January 1, 1945, at the village of Chenogne, the tension finally snapped. Approximately 60 German prisoners, many from the same units involved in the Malmedy atrocities, were gathered in a snowy field. The mechanical grind of M1 Garand bolts was the only warning. Within minutes, the snow was stained a dark, frozen crimson. Patton wrote in his diary that day, "The 11th Armored is somewhat green, and after the Malmedy massacre, they were in a state of mind that led to some unfortunate incidents with prisoners. I trust we can conceal it." But Patton wasn't just concealing a crime. He was analyzing a strategic necessity. He knew that the SS relied on being feared. If he could make the American soldier more terrifying than the SS, he could break the German spirit. He analyzed the risk of a court-martial and decided that his reputation was a small price to pay for the accelerated collapse of the Reich. He told his officers, "We are not just killing Germans. We are ripping out the living goddamn guts of a diseased ideology." This wasn't just a lapse in discipline. It was the birth of a new, darker doctrine of total war. The weather played its part. At 18 degrees, the distinction between life and death was already razor-thin. Soldiers who had watched their friends freeze to death in foxholes had little patience for the rights of men who had bragged about execution. Patton's logic was that a quick, brutal lesson in reality would save lives in the long run. If the SS knew that surrender to the Third Army didn't guarantee survival, they might fight harder. Or, as Patton hoped, they would finally understand the weight of the hell they had unleashed. He gambled on the latter. He wanted the SS to feel the same existential dread they had inflicted on Europe for 6 years. By April 1945, the Third Army was no longer just a military force. It was a juggernaut of vengeance. On April 12th, Patton, alongside Generals Eisenhower and Bradley, entered the Ohrdruf concentration camp. For a man who had seen the carnage of the Meuse-Argonne and the deserts of North Africa, what he saw there changed him forever. He saw the pyres, stacks of railway ties where the SS had attempted to incinerate thousands of bodies to hide their crimes. The smell was a physical weight, a mixture of rotting flesh and industrial chemicals. Patton didn't just see the dead. He saw the mechanical, bureaucratic nature of the slaughter. One captured SS administrator, a man who had likely managed the camp with the same no-prisoner pride as the officer in the Ardennes, tried to appeal to Patton's sense of order. He claimed he was just a bureaucrat following directives. Patton's response was legendary. He didn't argue. He didn't debate the law. He forced the local German citizens of the nearby town, those who claimed they didn't know, to march through the camp and witness the horror. He then issued a directive that echoed throughout the ranks. Any SS found guarding these camps are to be treated as bandits, not soldiers. In Patton's mind, a soldier had honor. A bandit was simply vermin to be cleared from the earth. This wasn't just a tour of a camp. It was the final destruction of the noble soldier myth within the SS. The consequence of this was a shadow war within the war. Intelligence reports suggest that Patton's G2 officers began a process of accelerated interrogation. When an SS officer bragged or showed defiance, they weren't sent to a camp in the rear. Many disappeared during transfers. Patton understood that to cure the disease of Nazism, the most infected cells had to be destroyed before they could spread in the post-war world. He analyzed the future and saw a Europe plagued by Nazi insurgents. He decided to solve that problem in the spring of 1945, one forest clearing at a time. Behind the headlines of the Great Crusade, a darker war was being waged in the forests of Bavaria. Patton's Third Army had become a name that inspired a specific kind of dread among the German high command. When the SS officer bragged about never taking prisoners, Patton decided to adopt the enemy's rules, but with American industrial efficiency. By late April 1945, the Third Army's G2 intelligence section had become a factory for locating SS high-value targets. These weren't just men with maps. They were men with blood-stained records. The logic of the commander was to strip away the anonymity of the SS. He forced captured officers to stand in the mud for hours, facing the victims they had murdered, stripping away their Superman persona layer by layer until only a shivering, terrified man remained. Patton wrote in a letter to his wife, Beatrice, "The German is a strange animal. He is either at your throat or at your feet. I prefer him at my feet. looking up at the mess he has made. This was the core of Patton's philosophy. The only way to cure the disease of Nazism was to force the carrier to look into the mirror until he broke. He authorized the use of vengeance squads, small, mobile units of intelligence officers and Jewish American soldiers who were tasked with finding SS leaders before they could disappear into the civilian population. This wasn't just revenge. It was a preemptive strike against the future. This wasn't just a pursuit. It was a psychological deconstruction of the master race. The risk was immense. Patton was operating outside the traditional chain of command, often ignoring orders from chef to observe proper legal procedures. But Patton knew that the legal procedures of 1945 were not designed for the atrocities of the 1940s. He analyzed the alternative, letting these men go free to rebuild their networks. He chose the path of the executioner. The result was that by the time of the final surrender, the SS in Patton's sector were not surrendering as a proud elite. They were surrendering as broken, desperate men who feared the Third Army more than they feared the wrath of Berlin. The war ended in May 1945, but the legend of Patton's cold justice became a permanent shadow over the history of the SS. The officer who once bragged about mercy being a weakness vanished into the chaos of post-war ruins, his arrogance shattered by a general who refused to play by a broken set of rules. Patton proved that while Western democracy was built on liberty, it possessed a lethal capacity for retribution when pushed to the edge of the abyss. He analyzed the future of Europe and decided that to ensure a lasting peace, the myth of the Nazi Superman had to be buried in the same frozen mud as their defeated tanks. He took the moral weight of these dark decisions onto his own shoulders, becoming the monster that the monsters feared. He ensured that the butcher's boast was finally met with the liberator's fury. Patton remains history's most polarizing commander. Was he a war criminal, or the only man with the iron will to do what was necessary? Tell us your take in the comments. If you value this kind of deep historical analysis, hit the like button and subscribe.
Thanks for watching. My name is Mike. See you in the next video.